Hi guys, Olive here today to share my most anticipated new book releases, all due to come out in April, May, and June 2026. I love looking through catalogs of upcoming book releases and flagging all the ones I think I will love to read once they hit shelves. I swear it's like going through the JCPenney catalog all over again, but as an adult, I can't wait to share what I have found with you. I've got a good mix of smart literary fiction, immersive narrative nonfiction, and a few slightly kooky wildcards thrown in there, just for good measure. So get your TBRs and your wish lists ready. We are starting at the top with April. On the first new release Tuesday of the quarter, April 7th, there are 4 new books coming out that I wanted to highlight for you. And the first one is one that I suspect many of my fellow nonfiction lovers out there may already have at the very top of their lists. That, of course, is London Falling, A Mysterious Death in a Gilded City and a Family's Search for Truth by Patrick Radden Keefe. This is, of course, the new release from the author of Say Nothing and Empire of Pain, 2 tremendously popular nonfiction books. But this one tells the true story of a 19-year-old whose sudden death led his family to uncover the double life he had been leading in London's dangerous underworld. I am nearly positive that this is going to be the nonfiction book that everyone is reading later this year, including me. I'm a part of that everyone. The other 3 April 7th releases I'm going to talk about, though, are all novels, and one of them is a work of historical fiction titled Love and Other Monsters by Emily Franklin. This is a book that gives voice to the often overlooked stepsister of the author Mary Shelley. She was a real woman, but in this book we meet a fictionalized version of her at age 80 when she discovers a long-lost journal of hers in which she had chronicled the most important summer of her life, the one she spent in the company of her stepsister and other literary figures in Switzerland. That's right, the summer that gave birth to Frankenstein. I think that this book sounds like exactly my kind of thing. There's the literary element. I've also heard it be called introspective and nostalgic. It sounds fantastic. I'm also very excited about The Midnight Show by Lee Kelly and Jennifer Thorne, which begins in the 1980s against a backdrop of this SNL-like comedy sketch variety show. The novel centers around this comedian who disappears at the height of her fame, but then also a journalist who is investigating her vanishing 40 years after the fact. I've heard this one be called Daisy Jones and the Six, but for comedy, likely because it also uses a mixed media format. So there are articles and interviews woven in throughout the storytelling. I've seen so much good buzz surrounding this one already. The final April 7th release on my radar is called The Counting Game by Sinead Nolan, which, if you just take one look at this ominous cover, it's clearly a thriller. It also involves a disappearance, like the previous book, but this time it's the disappearance of a child. In 1995, in southwestern Ireland, 2 siblings enter a supposedly haunted forest, and only one comes out. The surviving sibling goes completely nonverbal after this incident, and so a psychotherapist is brought in to work with him to try to figure out what happened to his sister. I am beginning to reluctantly accept that Tana French may never give us another Dublin Murder Squad series novel. I'm heartbroken about that, but I'm hoping that this read-alike can sort of fill that void for me. April 14th also has a quartet of books I wanted to shine a spotlight on. First is a new history called Rasputin, The Downfall of the Romanovs by Anthony Beevor. Beevor is a British historian who has spent most of his career, it looks like, focusing on World War II. So it was a little bit curious to see him turn his focus to Imperial Russia and the so-called Mad Monk, who earned the trust of the Romanov family by seemingly easing the bleeding episodes of their hemophiliac son. If you know me, you know that I am endlessly fascinated by Russian history, and this is the era that I know the best. So I'll be reading with a critical eye. The other nonfiction release coming out on the 14th was kindly offered to me by the publisher. It's called Lucky Devils, the true story of 3 rebel gamblers who beat the odds and changed the game by Kit Shillel. This book tells the true story of how in the late 1970s, 3 men utilized emerging technology and strategic ingenuity to beat the house, amass enormous wealth, and permanently change the way that certain games are played. I am not much of a gambler myself. I just don't have the stomach for it, but I do love Las Vegas. And I discovered when I took my first trip there and I brought along a copy of a book called Bringing Down the House that I positively eat up a good Vegas story. So I was happy to accept a digital copy of this. The remaining 2 April 14th releases that I want to talk about are both fiction. First is The Lost Book of Elizabeth Barton by Jennifer N. Brown. This is a dual timeline historical mystery that begins in an English country manor where an ambitious professor discovers the long-lost manuscript of a 16th century prophetess known as the Holy Maid of Kent. I don't know what it is about historical fiction centered around women who have religious visions, but something about that formula clearly works for me. Canticle by Joyce Rich Edwards was one of my favorite novels of last year. I have loved Matrix by Lauren Groff for a really long time. So another book in that same vein sounded very appealing. And finally, exciting news for my fellow fans of Where'd You Go, Bernadette. Maria Semple has a new novel coming out called Go Gentle. The main character of this new novel is a single mother. She doubles as a stoic philosopher. She works for an eccentric billionaire. She is fed up with dating, and so she's trying to form a support group for divorced women in her Upper West Side building, until a chance encounter not only pulls her into a romance that she wasn't expecting, but also into a high-stakes mystery that threatens to upend her carefully controlled life. This sounds delightfully bizarre and frenetic in a way that really only Maria Semple could deliver, and I can't wait. There's only one book on my list that comes out on April 21st, Beyond Inheritance, Our Ever-Mutating Cells and a New Understanding of Health by Roxanne Campsey. This science book explores how our bodies aren't as fixed or static as we may think them to be, because our cells are constantly changing, mutating, adapting in response to the world around us. And not only does that sound fascinating, but this book comes with strong early praise from authors that I really love, including Ed Yong. I adore his books, and so this was an easy addition to my list. The following Tuesday, April 28th, will bring another science title I'm really excited about. It's called The Story of Birds, A New History from Their Dinosaur Origins to the Present by Steve Brusatte. This comes from the author of The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs, and just like the title says, it traces the evolutionary history of birds from their dinosaur ancestors all the way up to the roughly 14,000 species alive today. Again, if you know anything about me, you know I have a thing for birds, so this could not escape my notice. Also out on the 28th is Salt, Sweat, and Steam, The Fiery Education of an Accidental Chef by Bridget Washington. And in this memoir, the Trinidadian food writer recounts her time spent at the Culinary Institute of America, which is essentially the boot camp of the food world, preparing aspiring chefs for the highly intense atmosphere and culture of professional kitchens. I am but a humble home cook myself. I am perfectly content to cook for two, but that doesn't mean that I'm not nosy about what happens at the CIA. Another memoir due to be released that same day is Dogs, Boys, and Other Things I've Cried About by Isabel Klee. And if you don't recognize her name, you may recognize her social media handle, Simon Sits, because on social media she documents how she fosters dogs, prepares them for adoption, and I have loved watching her content for a really long time. I may own cats at this point in my life, but I grew up with dogs. I love dogs just as much as I love cats. And so I have loved watching the stories of her foster dogs. And I've also seen how she has this beautiful way with words. So I am positive this is going to be a gorgeous memoir. Not only do I highly recommend her content on social media, but I also recommend joining me and picking up her book when it's released. I also hope you'll join me at the Pittsburgh Book Festival on May 30th. It is a free event, and this year I am once again lucky enough to be one of their ambassadors. One of the authors who will be attending is Kanwin Shu, who will be there to promote her debut novel, Boring Asian Female. This book follows a diligent, highly motivated, but also deeply unstable Columbia student whose entire identity is wrapped up in getting into Harvard Law. But when she doesn't, The resulting downward spiral is something to behold. This sounds unhinged in the best way possible. I can't wait to read it and hopefully get to say hi to the author in person on May 30th. Speaking of May, though, moving into May releases, another complicated woman will take center stage in a nonfiction book due to come out on May 5th called This Dark Night. Emily Bronte, A Life by Deborah Lutz. This new biography of arguably the most complex and tortured of the Bronte sisters draws upon previously inaccessible manuscripts and notebooks. I do wish it had been released a little bit earlier to better line up with that new Wuthering Heights adaptation that came out, but I'm intrigued to read it whenever I get my hands on it. There's another nonfiction book coming out on May 12th that also caught my attention, largely because it focuses on a topic that I have previously explored here on my channel before. Apples. It's called American Rambler, Walking the Trail of Johnny Appleseed by Isaac Fitzgerald. This book blends memoir, history, and adventure nonfiction as Isaac Fitzgerald talks about how he recreated the path that the real Johnny Appleseed took from Massachusetts all the way over to Indiana. So Fitzgerald describes his own travels and all of the mishaps that happened along the way, while also reflecting on the man who helped preserve apple diversity in America. I learned way more about Johnny Appleseed than I ever thought I would as I was reading the 2 books for my 2 Books on Apples video, which completely accidentally was a roaring success. I think it's still the best 2 Books on video I've ever made. And ever since then, apples have been a niche interest of mine. So I had to put this on the list. Moving on to May 19th, there are 2 novels on my radar. The first one comes from Mickey Brammer, author of The Collected Regrets of Clover. She is returning with a new book called Good Joy, Bad Joy. And this book stars an 89-year-old woman who is determined to savor the time she has remaining with her best friend after one of them gets a terminal cancer diagnosis. From everything I read about this book, it sounds like it's going to be a tender ode to late bloomers, platonic soulmates, and, well, joy. The other May 19th release leans far more into pop culture. It's called Rachel West and the Fallen Starlet by Emma Mills. This is a cozy mystery set in 2008 Los Angeles, and it follows an entertainment journalist who is navigating one of the most toxic eras of celebrity culture. During the course of her work, she befriends a formerly troubled child star who is now completely clean and sober. But when that friend is found dead of a rumored overdose, our journalist main character knows that something is up. So she starts investigating, trying to figure out what actually happened to her friend. I was unfortunately fully tuned in to this era of celebrity gossip, so I suspect this will speak directly to my inner teenager. Speaking of pop culture, though, on May 26th, we will see Marilyn and Her Books, The Literary Life of Marilyn Monroe by Gail Crowther hit shelves. This nonfiction title explores Marilyn Monroe's personal book collection and also all of the literary figures she encountered and, in one case, married in her too brief lifetime. June 1st, 2026 will be what would have been her 100th birthday, and so I imagine we will see this book, amongst other books on Marilyn Monroe, featured prominently in library and bookstore displays around that time. I imagine the publisher timed this as such. There's one more May 26th release I wanted to mention, though. It's called The Lemon Twist by Elan Levy. This novel blends literary fiction and mystery. We follow a former figure skater whose career ends after a tragic skating accident in 1984, and in the aftermath of that accident, she becomes determined to investigate the disappearance of her estranged sister. I was also lucky enough to get a digital arc of this one, and I am very eager to dive in. Now we're moving into the final month of the quarter, June. And the first 2 Tuesdays of the month have some real gems. We will, of course, begin with the first one, June 2nd, and Decoding the Devil, Black Women Codebreakers, and the Secret War Against Stalin's Bomb by Sarah Valentine. This is a history book about 2 segregated codebreaking units who were both racing to uncover Stalin's atomic secrets at the dawn of the Cold War. The subject matter alone intrigues me, but then I also found out that this author grew up here in Western Pennsylvania, so I feel like this book was meant to find me. You remember earlier on in the video when I mentioned a book called Bringing Down the House about Las Vegas? Well, that was written by a man named Ben Mesrich, who also has a book coming out on June 2nd called Checkmate: Genius, Lies, Ambition, and the Biggest Scandal in Chess. This one centers on a bombshell cheating accusation against a 19-year-old chess prodigy and the explosive investigation that followed the accusation. At this point in my reading life, I have read a number of Ben Mesrich's nonfiction books, and I genuinely don't know how he produces these high-octane, yet simultaneously deeply researched accounts as quickly as he does. The man is a machine, but they are always so compulsively readable. But now onto the fiction side of the June 2nd coin, I am especially anticipating The Children by Melissa Albert, which follows the estranged adult children of a beloved fantasy author who actually wrote her children into her most famous series. But the lives of her children grow even messier and more complicated when the author dies and leaves that series unfinished. This one is already racking up some really impressive reviews. Rounding out the date is The Jellyfish Problem by Tessa Yang, which is a novel that follows a lonely jellyfish researcher who is drawn to this remote island after receiving a grainy video from an old college friend of hers that she hasn't heard from in years. But the footage appears to show a massive and possibly even mythical jellyfish. But beyond just the sea creature intrigue of it all, this novel also reportedly explores grief and human connection. It sounds like it has all of the ingredients of a book I will go on to love. The final new release date of this quarter that I'll be discussing in the video is June 9th, when Pulitzer Prize winning author of Less, Andrew Sean Greer, will release his latest novel, Villa Coco, which sounds like this completely charming coming-of-age story in which a young man takes a job in idyllic Tuscany and finds himself drawn into the orbit of a mysterious widow. Dare I say this book gives just a hint of the Enchanted April? In any event, I'm gonna read it. I truly cannot think of a more olive way to end this quarter than with The Book of Birds, a field guide to wonder and loss by Robert Macfarlane and Jackie Morris, which, believe it or not, is a project 7 years in the making. This book profiles 49 different species of birds that are presently in decline or even endangered in Britain. Robert Macfarlane provides the information. He talks about their habits and their habitats, while Jackie Morris provides luminous illustrations that she's well known for. I actually spent some time last year going through some of her children's books just for fun, and the artwork is so stunning. This is one I know I'm going to want to own. So that's just a sampling of what new release tables are shaping up to look like in April, May, and June of this year. Let me know which of these titles intrigued you the most, or if there are any books coming out during this window of time that I didn't mention that you think I should know about. Please put any or all of that down in the comment section below. If you want to check out any of the titles I spoke about today, they are all listed and linked for you in the description box below. Also in the description box, as well as up in the cards, I will include a link to my previous video about all of the anticipated releases of the first quarter of this year in case you missed it, or if you would like to revisit it now that most, if not all of those books should be out in the world ready to read. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.